The day of my husband's funeral was cold, even though the sun was shining. I remember standing beside his coffin, clutching the sleeve of my black coat like it could somehow hold me together. People came and went, offering empty words, soft smiles, and fake tears. I had been married to Marcos for nearly 50 years, and now he was gone. Just like that. But what haunts me most about that day isn't the flowers, or the priest, or even the way my knees buckled when they lowered him into the ground. It was a note, a tiny torn piece of paper slipped into my palm by my youngest grandson, Lucas, when no one was looking. He's only 9, too young to carry secrets like that. But when I opened the note in the privacy of the church bathroom, I felt the ground beneath me shift. "Grandma, they want to hurt you." That's all it said. 7 words written in shaky pencil marks that looked like they had been traced in fear. My hands trembled as I flushed the toilet and stared at my reflection. I had no idea what it meant, or who he was talking about. But something told me I needed to start listening, and fast. My grief would have to wait. Before Marcos died, our life was quiet. We had our routines. Morning coffee on the porch, afternoons watching old telenovelas, nights spent playing cards. He had been slowing down lately, but nothing that made me think he'd be gone so soon. The doctor said it was a heart attack, sudden and irreversible. I believed that for about 3 hours. Then I started noticing the looks, the hushed voices, the way my daughter Anna kept checking her phone during the wake, the way my son-in-law Rogerio avoided my eyes when he hugged me. You don't get to be old without learning how to read a room. Something was off. And now, with that note burning a hole in my purse, I couldn't ignore the whispers anymore. I started paying attention, listening, watching, but I didn't let them see it. I played the role of the grieving widow perfectly. Shaky voice. Slow steps. Distracted eyes. They thought I was broken. Good. Let them think that. Lucas wouldn't say anything more about the note when I asked him. He just stared at the floor and mumbled that he didn't want to get in trouble. I told him he did the right thing, kissed his forehead and tucked him into bed. But I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen drinking tea until the sky turned orange. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let this go. Whatever was happening, I was going to find out. A few days after the funeral, Anna came to my house with a stack of papers. "Legal things," she said. "Just some updates to the will, some forms to sign. Nothing serious." I didn't touch them. I asked her to leave them on the table. She smiled, too wide, too sweet, and told me to take my time. But I could feel her eyes scanning the room, looking at my china cabinet, the silver tray, the antique clock, things she knew had value. When she left, I read every single page. There were documents there I had never seen before. Powers of attorney, transfer of assets, medical directives I didn't remember signing. And they all had my signature on them, or at least what looked like my signature. That's when the chill hit me, not in my bones, but in my blood. Something was very wrong. I didn't want to believe it at first. These were my children, the ones I raised, bathed, sang to sleep. I loved them. But love doesn't make people honest, and grief doesn't make them kind. Inheritance changes people. I'd heard the stories from friends. How the family starts circling before the body's even cold. I just never thought it would be my family. The next week, Rogerio started visiting more often, always alone, always with some excuse to check on me. One time it was to fix the sink. Another time it was to bring groceries. But I saw the way he looked at my medicine cabinet, the way he asked too many questions about what pills I was taking. It made my skin crawl. I started hiding my pills. I began pretending to take them in front of him, then flushing them later. I didn't know if they had been tampered with, but I wasn't about to take that risk. My appetite disappeared, but I forced myself to eat. I didn't want to give them any reason to call me weak, or worse, senile. Lucas became my only source of truth. I started asking him little things. What did Mommy and Daddy talk about at dinner? Did anyone mention Grandma? He was innocent, but he noticed everything. He told me they had lots of serious talks lately, that they used words like home and papers and deal. Home, as in a nursing home? That word rang in my head like a warning bell. I began preparing. I found an old voice recorder from when Marcos used to study English. I charged it, tested it, and hid it in the living room shelf behind the fake books. The next time Anna and Rogerio came by, I made sure it was recording. They didn't say anything incriminating. Not yet, but they were too careful. Their voices lowered every time they leaned in. At one point, Anna even closed the kitchen door while I was supposedly in the bathroom. That night, I listened to the recording 3 times. Nothing concrete, but enough to know I wasn't imagining it. Then came the day I found the pill bottle in the trash. Full. Untouched. It was the same bottle I thought I'd been taking. Only this one had someone else's name on it. A man. Dead for years. It was hidden under the sink behind a box of old soap. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just paranoid. I was being watched. And worse, I was being targeted. I went to my doctor privately. Told her everything. She ran tests, reviewed my meds, and confirmed what I feared. My prescriptions had been changed without her knowledge. She gave me a new set, sealed and safe. She also advised me to be cautious. Said she had seen this kind of thing before. I asked her what kind of thing. She looked at me sadly and said, "Families who don't want to wait for death." The next night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak in the house. I had never felt so alone in my life. Marcos was gone. My children couldn't be trusted. The house felt like a trap, not a home. But I wasn't afraid. I was angry. And that anger gave me strength. So when Rogerio showed up again, unannounced, I greeted him with a smile. Because now I had a plan. The next morning I started locking the doors, even when I was inside. It may seem paranoid to some, but when the people you're supposed to trust begin circling like vultures, caution isn't a choice. It's survival. I went through every drawer in the house, every cupboard, every shelf. I took inventory of everything I owned. Jewelry, legal documents, family photos. I photographed them all and uploaded the pictures to a private drive Lucas helped me set up. Though I didn't tell him why. He just thought Grandma was being silly with her new phone. I let him think that. Anna called again that afternoon. She wanted to bring me soup, my favorite kind. The one Marcos used to make with garlic and little pasta shells. I said thank you, but no. I told her I was fasting for spiritual reasons. She hesitated, then hung up with a cheerful tone that didn't fool me. Later that day, I found a sticky note on the kitchen counter. I didn't put it there. It said, "Take your pills, Mom. We love you." My hands shook when I read it. I knew I had to take control before things spiraled further. I went down to the city records office and requested a certified copy of Marcos's death certificate. The clerk handed it to me without question. I checked every detail. Time of death. Cause. Witness. That's when I noticed something strange. The signature of the doctor wasn't our regular physician. It was someone I had never heard of. I jotted down the name and left quickly, my stomach churning. Back home, I started digging into that name. It took hours, but I eventually found a news article. The doctor had been under investigation 2 years ago for forging end-of-life care documents. Nothing was ever proven, but he had quietly retired shortly after. My heart raced as I put the pieces together. Was he involved in Marcos's death? Had someone paid him? I didn't know yet, but I knew where to look next. I called Rosa, an old friend from church whose nephew worked at the hospital. I asked her for a favor. Discreetly, of course. She promised to get me any internal records about Marcos's treatment in his final hours. While I waited, I started a journal, writing down every suspicious detail, every odd conversation, every change in my medications or bank accounts. I kept the journal in a locked drawer beside my bed. It was my only sense of control. One night, I heard the back door creak. I knew I had locked it. I got up slowly, barefoot, and peeked into the hallway. There was no one there, but in the morning, the lock had fresh scratches on it, like someone had tried to force it open. I installed a camera the next day, a small one, hidden in the hallway clock. Again, I didn't tell anyone. I was playing dumb, and it was working. A few days later, Anna returned. She brought pastries and a fake smile. She sat on my couch like she owned the place and started talking about how lonely I must be, about how hard it must be to manage the house on my own, about how much better I'd feel with nurses and activities and structure. I listened, nodding. I even smiled. But inside I was screaming. She wasn't visiting to check on me. She was here to wear me down. That's when she mentioned it. The nursing home. Again. She had brochures in her bag. Glossy pages filled with happy old people playing bingo and holding hands in gardens. I pretended to be interested. I asked questions. She lit up like a Christmas tree, pulling out papers and schedules and packages. But I was watching her face, not the brochures. Her eyes gleamed when she thought I was saying yes. I told her I'd think about it. She left the documents on the kitchen table. I waited until she was gone and threw them all into the fireplace. I didn't light them. Not yet. I wanted a record, just in case. That night I checked the camera footage from the hallway. What I saw made my blood run cold. Around 2 a.m. The footage showed Rogerio unlocking the back door. He moved through the kitchen quietly, went to the medicine cabinet, and then left. He didn't know he was being watched. The next day I checked the pills. 2 bottles were gone, replaced with new ones. I didn't touch them. Lucas came by after school and asked if I was okay. I told him yes, then gave him a small envelope. Inside was a USB drive with the footage. I told him to give it to his teacher and ask her to hold it just in case. He didn't ask why. That boy is smarter than anyone realizes. The next time Anna came over, she wasn't alone. Rogerio was with her, and their lawyer. They sat me down like I was on trial and began explaining a plan. It was all for my benefit, of course. Medical guardianship, financial oversight, a smooth transition. I smiled the whole time, even as my insides twisted. I asked them to give me a day to think. They agreed. But before they left, Rogerio leaned in and whispered something that made my heart nearly stop. "You're not well, Dolores. We just want what's best for you. Before it's too late." That night, I watched the camera again. Nothing unusual this time, but I barely slept. I kept hearing his voice in my head. That smug tone. That veiled threat. The next morning, Rosa called. She had the files, and what she told me changed everything. Rosa's voice was trembling when she called. She told me to meet her at our old church, the one where we used to organize food drives and Christmas plays. It was safer, she said. I arrived early, heart pounding, holding a rosary that wasn't even mine. It had belonged to Marcos. I hadn't stepped inside the church since his funeral. The wooden pews smelled like dust and wax. Rosa was waiting in the last row, holding a thick manila envelope in her lap. When she handed it to me, she didn't say much. Just that I needed to be careful. Very careful. Inside were photocopies of my husband's hospital records. They showed something that made my skin go cold. A medication administered in the final hours of his life that wasn't part of his treatment plan. The dosage was high, dangerous. And here's the worst part. It had been ordered by a temporary physician on shift. The name matched the signature on Marcos's death certificate. The same doctor under investigation. A name my husband had never once mentioned. I stared at the papers, my hands shaking. This wasn't some accident or mistake. Someone had orchestrated this. They had known which doctor to contact. They had planned the timing. And now, they were trying to do the same to me. I had no proof of who exactly made the call. But I didn't need a confession. I knew it was them. Anna and Rogerio, my own daughter and her husband. And now they were after everything Marcos and I had built. I didn't go home immediately. I sat in the church for hours, rereading the files until the ink started to blur from my tears. I thought of Marcos, how he had always protected me, how we'd worked hard to leave something behind for our children. He trusted them, and they had taken his life to get it faster. I felt sick, but I wasn't broken. No, not yet. When I finally walked into my house, it no longer felt like mine. Every corner held shadows. Every silence felt like a trap. I locked the doors behind me and sat down with my journal. I wrote everything Rosa told me, every medication listed, every suspicious date and time. I scanned the records and uploaded them to the same drive Lucas had helped me set up. That drive was becoming my insurance policy. I knew I needed to move fast. I made an appointment with a lawyer the next day, not the family lawyer. A new one, a woman named Clara, who specialized in elder abuse and estate protection. I brought copies of everything. The false documents Anna gave me, the medication logs, the video footage. Clara listened without interruption, her eyes narrowing with each new piece of evidence. When I finished, she sat back and said something I'll never forget. "This isn't just fraud, Mrs. Montenegro. It's attempted murder." The words struck me like thunder. I had known it in my gut, but hearing it out loud was something else entirely. Clara promised to take immediate action. We would freeze my accounts, revoke the power of attorney, and file a motion to contest the existing documents. She warned me things might get ugly. I told her I didn't care. I had already lost everything once. I wasn't going to lose it again. Back at home, I found another surprise. A gift basket on my porch, filled with chocolates, and a card that read, "We love you and want you to feel safe. Anna." My stomach turned. They were tightening their grip, the calm before the storm. I brought the basket inside with gloves, just in case. Paranoia? Maybe. But I'd rather be paranoid than poisoned. Lucas came over that evening. I gave him a big hug and made his favorite hot chocolate. We sat on the couch like nothing was wrong. I didn't tell him about the lawyer or the files or what Rosa found. He was still just a child, and I wanted to protect at least one person from the darkness creeping in. But when he looked up at me and said, "Grandma, do you feel safe here?" I almost broke. I lied and told him yes. Over the next few days, I noticed more changes. My phone started acting strange. Random calls, texts that disappeared. My emails weren't reaching people. I suspected someone had tampered with it. Clara confirmed it. My accounts had been accessed from a different IP address the same day Anna and Rogerio visited. They were trying to erase the trail, but it was too late. I had already made copies. They couldn't erase everything. Clara filed the injunction. My financial accounts were locked under my name only. The forged documents were under review. And most importantly, I gave her legal authority to act on my behalf. I wasn't going to let them control me. Not legally, not medically, not emotionally. But I still needed to know how deep the plan went. I called Rogerio, told him I needed help fixing the water heater. He came quickly, too quickly. He arrived with a bag of tools and that same rehearsed smile. I led him to the basement and asked if he could look at the fuse box too. While he was distracted, I checked his bag. Inside, I found a small plastic case. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was full of syringes. I didn't say a word. I just smiled when he came back upstairs, thanked him for his help, and watched him leave. The moment he drove off, I ran to my safe, locked the syringes inside, and wrote down the time and date. Then I called Clara. She said it was time to go to the police. But before we could, something happened that pushed everything into chaos. That night, someone tried to break into my house. They jiggled the back door handle, forced the window, but the security system blared before they got in. The camera caught nothing but a shadow. I called the police, filed the report, but no one was arrested. Just a warning, they said. Probably a random thief. It wasn't random. The next day, Rosa didn't answer her phone. I called her again. Nothing. I started panicking. She always called back. Always. I drove to her apartment. Her door was locked. Lights off. I left a note and returned home. Then my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from an unknown number. It said only this: "Stop digging, or next time, we won't miss." I played that voicemail at least 10 times. The voice was distorted, but the threat was clear. I wasn't just uncovering secrets. I was stepping on a landmine. My heart pounded in my chest, like it was trying to escape. But my mind was sharper than ever. I knew then this wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about power. This was control. They wanted me erased, quietly, permanently, and dressed up in legal paperwork and good intentions. The first thing I did was change every lock in the house. I hired a locksmith who didn't ask questions and paid him in cash. Then I installed new cameras, not just inside, but hidden outside too. Under the porch, above the garage, and in the garden. I wanted eyes everywhere. They thought I was a vulnerable old woman. Let them think that. Every step they took, I would be watching. Lucas came over again, and I noticed how careful he was being. He didn't bring his backpack. He didn't mention Anna or Rogerio. He just sat close to me, helping me sort puzzle pieces at the table, quietly scanning the room like he expected someone to burst through the door. That boy knew more than he let on. I leaned in and asked him softly, "Did Mommy or Daddy ever talk about what would happen if Grandma wasn't around?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Just once," he said. "They said we'd move into a big house with a pool. They said you'd be safe somewhere else. It was subtle, but it was there. Their perfect little future depended on me disappearing. Rosa finally called me that night. Her voice was faint, tired. She told me she'd been sick, nausea, dizziness, headaches. The hospital said food poisoning, but she didn't eat anything different, and she hadn't left her apartment in days. I asked if she had received anything. Flowers, food, a gift." She paused. "Yes," she whispered. "A bottle of wine. No note. She had thought it was from a neighbor." My stomach twisted. I told her not to drink or eat anything unless it came from someone she trusted. She promised she'd be careful, but I could hear the fear in her voice. That bottle wasn't a gift. It was a warning. The next morning I went to the bank. I spoke directly to the branch manager and requested security footage of the last few times someone accessed my accounts in person. At first, she resisted, citing privacy concerns. But when I showed her the lawyer's documents, she agreed to help. We watched the footage together, and there he was, Rogerio, smiling, confident, using what looked like my ID. I stared at the screen like I was watching a stranger wear my skin. Clara filed the theft report immediately. We were building a case that was growing teeth, but I still had no proof connecting him or Ana directly to Marcos's death. That was the thread I needed to pull. So I made another call to the funeral director. I told him I wanted to order additional copies of Marcos's autopsy report. There was a long pause. Then he said something that made the blood drain from my face. "Mrs. Montenegro, there was no autopsy. It was waived. By the family. Waived. I never signed that." I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. Someone had forged my consent. They made sure there would be no investigation, no questions. Marcos had been silenced before I even had a chance to ask anything, and they had used my name to do it. That night, I sat in front of the fireplace with the documents in my lap. I stared at the flame, wondering how far they would go, how much longer I had. I didn't feel old anymore. I didn't feel fragile. I felt like a woman standing at the edge of a battlefield, and every photograph on the wall was a bullet they'd already fired. I could see Marcos's face smiling down from the mantel. I whispered to him, "I'm going to fix this." The next day, the police called me back. They had reviewed the footage from the break-in attempt. They found something, a car, partially visible in the neighbor's driveway camera. Clara requested a copy. It matched the car Rogerio drove, not just the make and model. The license plate. That was enough to request a warrant. But before anything could be done, Ana showed up at my door, unannounced. She had tears in her eyes. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. She said she knew I was angry, but that everything was a misunderstanding. She begged me not to involve lawyers, said Rogerio had been under stress, that they were just trying to help me transition into a safer life. I let her talk. I let her cry, but I didn't say a word. I just recorded the entire conversation with my phone in my pocket. Then she said something I didn't expect. She told me that if I didn't drop the case, Rogerio might do something stupid. That he was desperate. That he didn't mean for things to go this far. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't trying to protect me. She was trying to protect him. Ana left in a hurry when I refused to speak. The moment the door clicked shut, I sent the audio to Clara. I labeled it, "Confession Masked as Plea." Clara replied immediately. This was the crack in the wall we needed. She'd submit it with the rest of the evidence to the prosecutor's office. But there was something else I hadn't told her. A detail I had saved for just the right moment. 2 weeks before Marcos died, he had written me a letter. It was in his handwriting, on his stationery, tucked inside the pages of an old recipe book. I had found it only recently. In it, he mentioned feeling watched. He said he didn't trust Rogerio, that he suspected someone was tampering with his medication. He begged me to be careful, to trust no one. It was dated 3 days before his heart stopped. I sent that letter to Clara too, and that night I sat in my bedroom chair staring out the window into the darkness, waiting, not afraid, because the storm wasn't coming. It had already begun. The phone rang at 6:17 a.m. I hadn't slept, so I picked it up on the first ring. It was Clara. Her voice was tight, calm, and urgent all at once. The police had executed a search warrant on Rogerio's home early that morning. They found several prescription pads, blank and signed, hidden in a locked drawer. They found my forged medical directives, and they found syringes, just like the ones I had seen in his tool bag, tucked inside a shoebox labeled garage parts. It was enough to arrest him, and they had. I sat at the edge of my bed, gripping the phone, trying to process what that meant. It felt surreal. He was in custody. The man who smiled in my kitchen. The man who stood next to my husband's grave. The man who kissed my daughter in front of me and plotted my erasure behind my back. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was a strange emptiness, because one half of the machine was down, but Anna was still out there. By noon, the story broke on local news. Elder abuse, financial fraud, suspicion of medical tampering. No names were released yet, but it didn't take long for neighbors to put the pieces together. The phone started ringing. Old friends, church ladies, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know what happened. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to speak about it. Not yet. Anna didn't call. She didn't text. She disappeared completely. Clara said her phone was off, and no lawyer had contacted her yet. That wasn't good. Silence from Anna wasn't guilt. It was strategy. She was waiting to see how far I'd go, how much I knew. But what she didn't realize was that I was done being quiet. I had spent too long waiting, grieving, pretending. Now it was her turn to answer. That evening, Lucas came over with his backpack. He said he had packed some clothes, just in case he needed to stay over. My heart broke a little. I hadn't even said anything to him. But he knew. Kids always know. I let him sleep in the guest room and sat beside his bed until he drifted off. I don't remember praying that night, but I must have, because sometime before dawn, I found myself whispering Marcos's name and asking him to watch over us. The next morning, Clara called again. Rogerio had broken. He was scared. His lawyer was trying to make a deal. He had admitted to forging documents and attempting to assume control over my estate. But the real shock came when Clara told me what else he confessed. He didn't act alone. He said Anna had been the one to suggest moving me to a facility, that she had talked to the shady doctor, that she was the one who told him to change Marco's pills, weeks before he died. I dropped the phone. The truth finally had a voice. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. My own daughter had looked me in the eye and smiled while planning my downfall. And worse, she had helped kill the man I loved. Not in a moment of passion, not in desperation, but cold, calculated, timed for convenience. I went to the police station that afternoon. I gave them everything. The audio of Anna's visit, the letter from Marcos, the notes in my journal, the tampered medication bottles, the footage from my hallway camera. They collected it all. Piece by piece, my pain became evidence. My grief became fuel. And I became the witness they needed to bring her down. 2 days later, they issued the warrant for Anna's arrest. But she was gone. Vanished. No one knew where she was. Her house was empty. Her phone was disabled. Clara said it looked like she had been planning this for weeks, just in case. She had emptied several bank accounts, hidden assets. She was trying to disappear before the consequences caught up. But it was too late. The law was looking for her now, not just as an accessory, as a suspect in a suspicious death. I looked around my house and realized I hadn't cried in days. I hadn't allowed myself. I had been focused, moving forward like a woman on a mission. But when I walked into Marcos's old study and saw his glasses still sitting on the desk, I sat down and let the sobs come. It wasn't just about justice. It was about loss. Real, cruel, permanent loss. And it was my own child who had planted the seed of that pain. The funeral had been the beginning of this storm. Now I was standing in its center. Clara advised me to stay somewhere else for a few days, just until Anna was found. I refused. This was my home. And no one, not Anna, not Rogerio, not anyone, was going to scare me out of it. I wasn't a victim. I was a survivor. And I was going to sit in this house and feel everything I needed to feel. I owed that to Marcos and to myself. Lucas stayed with me again. He didn't ask where his parents were. He just helped me cook dinner and told me jokes he'd heard at school. His laughter was like a healing salve over a wound that refused to close. I tucked him in and kissed his forehead, just like I used to do with Anna when she was little, before everything broke. At 3 a.m., I heard the doorbell. 3 short rings. I got up slowly, heart thudding in my chest. I looked through the peephole. It was Anna, disheveled, crying, alone. She had come back. I didn't open the door right away. I stared at her through the peephole. My breath caught in my throat. Anna looked like a ghost of herself. Her hair was a mess, her face blotchy and pale. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her coat was wrinkled, her eyes swollen. She didn't knock again. She just stood there, shivering in the dark, clutching something in her hand. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. All I felt was silence between us, heavy and long overdue. When I finally opened the door, she didn't speak. She just looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I didn't say anything either. I stepped aside and let her walk in. She moved like a shadow, glancing around like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. She wasn't, but I needed to hear her. I needed to know why. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The same table where she had once made cookies with Marcos, where we had celebrated birthdays, where she had once painted her nails in secret as a teenager. She looked so small now, so broken. But I didn't let that fool me. I waited for her to speak. It took her a long time to start. She said she never wanted things to go that far, that it started with a conversation, a single selfish thought that turned into a plan. She said they were drowning in debt. Rogerio had lost money in bad investments. They saw my house, my pension, my savings as the only way out. She told herself it would just be guardianship, just a nursing home, just a little control. But then Marcos got in the way. Her voice cracked when she said his name, but mine didn't. I asked her directly, "Did you help kill him?" She looked away. That was my answer. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just stared at the wall, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. And I felt something shift in me. Not rage, not pity, something worse. A hollow disappointment so deep it felt like my chest was caving in. This was the baby I had rocked to sleep, the little girl who used to cry when I left her at school. And now she was sitting here, confessing, without confessing, to plotting my death and her father's. I asked her why she came back. She said she didn't know, that she had nowhere else to go, that Rogerio had turned on her after the arrest, blaming everything on her. She said she hadn't eaten in 2 days. She said she thought maybe, just maybe, I would understand. Forgive her. Forgive. The word felt like acid in my mouth. I stood up and went to the cupboard. I took out a plate and set it in front of her. Then I took bread, cheese, and a glass of water. I didn't speak while I did it. She looked confused. I told her to eat. She didn't hesitate. She ate like she hadn't in days. I sat back down and watched her chew, swallowing my own sickness as I did. How could she sit there and eat my food, drink my water, knowing what she'd done? When she finished, I told her she had 2 choices. She could go to the police herself, turn herself in, and maybe, just maybe, she could live with some dignity left. Or I would call them right then, and they'd take her away in front of her son. I told her Lucas was asleep upstairs, safe, loved, and I wouldn't let her anywhere near him. Her face crumpled. She begged, not for freedom, but for time. Just a little more time, to explain things to him, to say goodbye. I refused. I told her she had lost the right to explanations when she betrayed the family that raised her. She sank to the floor, sobbing. I picked up the phone. She didn't stop me. When the police arrived, she didn't fight. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She just stood, pale and hollow, and let them take her hands and cuff them gently behind her back. I watched from the porch. She looked back once, but I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I just stood like a statue, holding the weight of everything she had done. Lucas didn't wake up until morning. I didn't tell him right away. I made him pancakes, sat with him, listened to him talk about his favorite cartoon. I waited until he was done eating. Then I told him the truth, softly but fully. His mother had made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but that he was loved, that he was safe, and that none of it was his fault. He didn't cry. He just leaned into me and stayed there, silent. Later that day, I went to the cemetery. I brought Marcos new flowers. I sat by his grave and told him everything, every detail. I told him we did it, that the truth came out, that the lies were exposed. I told him our grandson was safe, that I was safe, and that I missed him more than anything in the world. When I returned home, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photo. It was Marcos, in the hospital, hooked to machines. But he was smiling. On the back, someone had written in red ink. He knew. I stared at that photo for a long time, my fingers trembling around the edges. Marcos. My Marcos. Lying in that hospital bed with tubes in his arms and machines humming beside him, yet somehow still smiling. Not weak, not afraid, peaceful. And behind that peaceful smile, now that I truly looked, was something else. Resignation, as if he had known it was the end, as if he had accepted it. And that red writing on the back, he knew, wasn't just a message. It was a confirmation. I don't know who sent it. It could have been a nurse, a friend of his, someone he had spoken to in those final hours. Or maybe it was someone anonymous, someone who wanted to remind me that this wasn't all in my head, that my husband hadn't died in ignorance, that he saw the storm coming, even if he chose not to tell me directly. I went inside and sat in his armchair, photo in hand, and whispered the same words over and over. Why didn't you tell me? The truth is, I think he did, in his own way. In that letter I found, he tried to warn me. Maybe he didn't want to burden me with fear. Maybe he hoped it wouldn't come to this. Or maybe he thought, somehow, that love could protect me from what was coming, that Anna would never go through with it, that our family, broken as it was, would stop short of murder. But they didn't. The investigation moved quickly after Anna's arrest. Clara worked closely with the prosecutor. The doctor who signed the falsified death certificate was brought in for questioning. Under pressure, he confessed to being paid off by Rogerio. There were transfers, hidden under business expenses. Everything was falling into place, like a puzzle I had never asked to put together. The court set a trial date, and I was told I would need to testify. I didn't hesitate, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted the truth on record. I wanted every lie, every forged paper, every late-night whisper behind my back, dragged into the light. I practiced my testimony in front of the mirror. I read aloud the letter Marcos wrote me. I reviewed the footage, the documents, the medical logs. I wasn't going to break. I had already broken. Now I was rebuilding. Lucas's school counselor called to check in. I had been granted temporary custody until Anna's legal status was resolved. They asked if I was able to handle it. I said yes, but it wasn't about what I could handle. It was about what he deserved. Stability, safety, the truth. No more secrets, no more shadows. One night, Lucas asked if he could visit his mother. I sat down with him, heart tight in my chest. I told him that one day, maybe if the court allows it, he could. But not yet. He didn't cry. He just nodded, then asked if he could sleep in my bed that night. I let him. He curled up beside me, and as I held him, I realized that he was my reason now. Not survival, not justice. Him. At the hearing, I wore Marcos's old watch. It was a small thing, but it made me feel like he was with me. I walked into the courtroom, sat down, and met Anna's eyes across the room. She looked tired, defeated, but not repentant. When I took the stand, I told the truth, slowly, clearly, about the papers, the medications, the forged documents, the break-ins, the threats, the pills swapped in the night, the doctor's confession, my husband's death. I ended with one sentence. She may have buried him, but she will not bury the truth. The room was silent. When I stepped down, I didn't look at her again. A week later, I received word that both Anna and Rogerio had accepted plea deals. The trial wouldn't go forward, but they would both serve time. Different lengths, different charges. Anna for fraud, conspiracy, and reckless endangerment. Rogerio for everything else, including what he did to Marcos. It wasn't the justice I dreamed of, but it was enough. After the sentencing, I took Lucas to the beach. He ran through the waves, laughing, kicking water into the air like he was 5 again. I sat in the sand, feeling the wind against my face, and thought about how much life could change in a year. How the people closest to you could turn into strangers. How sometimes the greatest threats weren't out in the world, but sitting at your own table. And how love, even twisted and betrayed, still left its marks. When we got home, I opened a drawer in Marcos's desk I hadn't touched in months. Inside, beneath a stack of birthday cards and old receipts, I found another envelope. No stamp, just my name written in his handwriting. Inside was a photo. It was me, sitting on the porch, smiling, holding a mug of coffee. And on the back he had written, "You're stronger than you think." I cried for the first time in weeks, not out of grief, but because I finally believed him. So that's my story. I lost the man I loved, faced betrayal from my own blood, and nearly had my life taken from me. But I refused to disappear. I stood up, I fought back, and I uncovered every secret they tried to hide. In the end, I didn't just survive. I reclaimed my power, my voice, and my peace. If you've ever felt silenced, underestimated, or alone, I hope my story reminds you. You are stronger than they think. If you made it this far, drop a comment saying I was here until the end so I know you're one of the real ones. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a story that might just change your life.